Hey, it's Matt Johnson here with Jeff Cohn, the founder of Elite Real Estate Systems and the flagship office, Omaha's Elite Real Estate Group. And we're talking about how to hire your first transaction coordinator. So let's bring in Jeff. Jeff, how's it going today?
Hey, Matt, it's going really well. How you doing, man?
Good, good. So we've got a lot of ground to cover, but we're going to try to keep it as short as we possibly can and not bore anyone to tears here. We've got a lot of stuff to get into, but let's besides the your experience at founding the team, and obviously it's the #1 team in Nebraska right now. You're going to do over 700 deals this year, but I want you to take me back more to the beginning of your career as a solo agent, and let's get into why you would actually hire a transaction coordinator first before any other type of additional staff, or before bringing on a buyer's agent or some other agent onto your team. What's the philosophy behind that?
Sure. Thanks, Matt. That's a great question. And, Matt and I got a chance to talk a little bit before the hangout today, and it's a challenge sometimes to go back as anyone reflects on like 5 or 10 years ago. It's a little bit of a challenge. And let's go back to like 2007, 2008. And I'm selling around 50 to 60 houses a year at that time. And I was becoming inundated with stuff that the average Joe agent's inundated with that wasn't making me money, like looking over contracts, sending out emails, literally filling out listing agreements or seller property condition disclosures and those types of things. And then a day it just kind of dawned on me, I need somebody on my team, on my staff full time, that I pay a salary, maybe plus a bonus, that would handle all of that stuff for me. So essentially, Matt, I wanted to find someone that would take on all of the non-income producing activities.
Okay. And why was that over, let's say, bring on a buyer's agent to handle all your buyer's deals, and then you keep doing all the paperwork on the seller side?
I think in the beginning, my thought process was that I could work both buyers and sellers as long as I had somebody alleviating all of the paperwork process.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, talk to me about, you mentioned something before we got on the air about taking your transaction coordinator actually with you to a listing presentation. Now, what's that all about, and why did that work so well?
Yeah, I'm surprised more people don't talk about this, but I really was trying to create my listing presentation in such a way that provided extreme value to a seller that I was presenting to, but it would allow me to exit the listing presentation once I knew they had chosen to move forward with our team. And so I started bringing my listing coordinator along with me, and she happened to be a female, and I found that we complemented each other. So while I was communicating maybe with the high D or the alpha of the couple, which could be a man or a woman, I found that she did a very good job communicating with the other person and filling space sometimes throughout the presentation to make it feel less awkward. But more importantly, once I finally got into the listing portion of the presentation, I would allow her to continue with the presentation, and I would actually exit. And so I would just say to a seller, once they decided to move forward and list with us, I'd say, I brought Cindy along. She'll be your main point of contact throughout this entire process of getting your house sold. And if you do feel comfortable moving forward with us now, would it be all right if I left Cindy here to take care of the listing paperwork? And 9 times out of 10, people said, absolutely, that sounds great. And I said, great. I'd stand up, thank them for the opportunity, and let them know I look forward to getting their house sold. And then Cindy would stay for another hour and get the paperwork filled out and talk to them a little bit more about process stuff.
Interesting. So you would actually drive separately to a listing presentation with your listing coordinator, knowing the whole time that if you took the listing, you're literally going to stand up and exit and just
absolutely. Here's what's even funnier, Matt. There are probably 10 different occasions where we had 2, 3, or even 4 listing presentations in an evening. So my listing coordinator would prepare all the paperwork for these listing presentations. And every time I'd walk into someone's house, let's say we did presentation at 6 o'clock, signing papers at 7:30. I'm off to the 8 o'clock list pres, and she comes in at 9, right when I'm ready to sign paperwork. I introduce her, have her start signing papers so that I can get to my 9:30 or 10 o'clock listing presentation. So she would be coming in on the back end, introducing herself. We'd create that relationship, and she'd take care of paperwork when I went on to the next one. So I was able to get my listing presentation with the marketing part, walking through the house, staging portion, and going through the market analysis, and then signing the paperwork. Right when I start to sign, it would be about 60 minutes to 90 minutes in. And what I was finding is when I was doing all of the paperwork at the listing presentation, it was taking me about 2 hours, if I was being honest with myself, from the point in which I entered the house to the point I was walking out with a signed listing agreement. And I think most agents would agree, if you're going to do it all, it's going to take you about 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I think probably a question that comes up in the minds of a lot of either newer agents or just agents that are used to being solo, they're used to doing everything themselves, is the idea of handing off that relationship to a transaction coordinator once the offer is accepted, and I would imagine that taking them into a listing presentation, that's got to make that handoff a lot easier.
Absolutely. You know, and you've heard a lot of people talk about the assembly line real estate team or the assembly line theory. We eventually in time completely systematized our business so that it was truly an assembly line. But at the very least, for a new agent doing 20 to 30 deals a year, I guarantee if you implement a transaction coordinator, especially full time, I believe you can double your business in 12 months because they're essentially going to be taking over key responsibilities that you once had to focus on, so and allow you to be able to go and do the things you do best, which is prospecting and meeting with new clients.
Yeah. All right. So let's take me through kind of keeping in that same area where you were a solo agent or maybe just bringing on your transaction coordinator. So you've mentioned in some other interviews that I've seen you on that you actually ran your entire business off of Excel spreadsheets for how many years now?
I think we probably went from about 2006 when I first got in. I had Excel on my computer, and I used that all the way through the fall of 2011.
Okay.
So about 6 years.
Now, did your transaction coordinator come in and just adopt your same processes, or did you give them some software to work with? Did they bring something with them?
My first hire as a transaction coordinator happened to be one of my sellers who was a huge systems person. And when she joined our group, she was my first hire, and I just showed her everything I expected her to do day in and day out. And so she first started off by following my process. And then, of course, over time, it evolved into her creating her own process that worked best for her, but all of which was done within a very simple, stripped down Excel spreadsheet.
Incredible. it's just insane. Now,
it was great.
The team that you have now, you're doing, I mean, you guys did over 400 deals last year, on track to do over 700 this year. What are you guys using for the transaction management on the back end now?
We actually do a lot within Boomtown, but Boomtown does not help a lot with as far as transaction management from contract to close. Believe me or not, we're still using pieces of Excel for that process, and we're also using the dot loop system. So we just moved from DocuSign over to dot loop. So dot loop's keeping us organized, but there are some pieces of Excel we're still implementing today. We feel like, I mean, there's a lot of great systems out there, and if they work for you, awesome. Do what you're gonna do is one of the phrases I always like to share with people. Just do what you're gonna do, but stay organized. For us, keep it simple, stupid. It's simple to use Excel. We haven't had any issues. Our processes are great, and we're going to do 700 unit sales this year by essentially using an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, and just to clarify, so if I understand it correctly, your transaction coordinator team touches every single file and not just helps the agent with the paperwork, but in your system, they take it from the point where that offer is accepted all the way to close?
Executed to close. Our team, everyone on my team knows when they list a house or when they execute a buy side, they don't touch paperwork after that. So our admin team, we have a full-time listing coordinator, a full-time buyer coordinator, a full-time client care specialist, a full-time marketing director, and within that entire administrative staff, they're the ones that are overseeing that whole process and making it so the agents can go back to doing what's most important, like I always talk about, which is prospecting and meeting with clients.
Right. All right. Well, let's get into the nitty gritty of how to find a great transaction coordinator. So take me through a little bit on the recruiting side and just how you bring people kind of into your orbit that are potential transaction coordinators and where you're finding these people to begin with that are even candidates.
Sure. Yeah. In the beginning, Matt, and I know this isn't your direct question, I just knew I wanted someone. I had no idea how to go about hiring it. I didn't even know what I needed. But of course, flash forward 8.5 years, I have a lot better idea as to what we're going after. So our recruiting process is probably not super unique. I think the thing that would stand out is that we're actually doing it. We have a process. For most people, it's, hey, I think this might be a good fit. Let's hire this person. Or it's a bad real estate agent, so let's turn them into a transaction coordinator. Not that that doesn't work. That's just not always the best way to go about it. So today, let's start off with finding. I know first acknowledging that we need something, I guess, would be the better starting point. A number that I've heard a lot in the industry is every 300 units that your team sells, that's a good time to hire a transaction coordinator, either a buyer's coordinator or a listing coordinator. But let's say you're doing 50 to 100 deals and your transaction coordinator is going to be your buyer and selling transaction coordinator and maybe your marketing department and accounting. A lot of times you want to wrap that person into all of those roles into one person. I think the first place is to go out and ask other real estate agents if they know of anybody that would be a good fit for your transaction coordinator. Because a lot of times they've either passed somebody up in the past or they've heard that somebody's looking to be a transaction coordinator. And there's depending on your market, there's probably anywhere from 20, 30 to 400 to 500 agents that you have a relationship with that you could either reach out with a mass email letting people know you're looking for that position, or posting it to your Facebook page. And a lot of agents are going to see that post.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, and I want to point out that through your relationship with Viral Marketing, there's a really good recruiting email that's publicly available on Viral's website that is just an all text email you can send out to anyone in your database, which you've done before. So you have a massive database. So I know you've reached out directly to them with like an all text email, just, letting them know we're hiring admin staff. Not a lot of detail about the position, just more selling the opportunity. It's kind of how that letter is structured. So anybody can go to getviral.com and you can look up the recruiting letter. I believe if you search for that on their website, you'll find that. And that's you've used that in the past. So
that's a great source. And then the other thing I talked about, social media, use what you're using right now. So if you have a big following on, a Facebook page, or you use Instagram or Twitter, feel free to post what you need out there. You'd be so surprised how many people, when you're out there asking for something or asking for your people to follow you or help the people that follow you to help you, they're excited to recommend names. Now, just be prepared. Out of the first 20 people they recommend, that might not be a good fit. And so take them through a process, which we'll talk about here in a minute, but definitely get as many names as you can. Most of our hires have come from essentially a grassroots or organic effort to find people, not only in the transaction coordinating role, but every other role on our team.
Yeah, and I think that's a key shift. Whereas, somebody might think, well, let's go straight to the market. Let's go to, Monster. Let's go to a career site or something like that. Your focus is always to reach out, and your real estate practice is like this as a solo agent, just to always start out by reaching out through the people that you already know.
Absolutely. And another group that I forgot to mention, Matt, that I think is a great fit is any of your lending and vending partners. So the home warranty company that you work with, or the inspection company, or the painter, these people know people. They especially know agents, and most of those people deal directly with transaction coordinators. So they might tell you that they know that Betty Sue on this other real estate team is actually really unhappy and is considering making a switch. They're going to be the best to kind of give you the temperature, if you will, of what the other transaction coordinators they have relationships with are feeling on their team. So I think lending vending partners is a great opportunity as well.
That is a really good strategy. Now let's say you do have some people that you have come in contact with, they're referrals from some source. What kind of process are you taking them through to interview them and just get a better sense of what their personality type is and whether they really fit that position?
Great question. We've actually done some training with Recruit Select. We're actually at Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, but we have taken a lot of Keller Williams classes along with a lot of other brokerages classes. And we really like Recruit Select. We don't follow the system exactly how it is, but we follow a lot of pieces of it. And the first piece is when someone refers a name to you, if it's not someone you're directly reaching out to, you're going to want to first reach out to that individual and have maybe a 10 to 15 minute conversation. And in that conversation, you're going to want to create a set of questions that are going to answer some key pieces as to what you're looking for in someone in any type of role on your team, especially a transaction coordinator. So first off, if you want someone full-time, one of your questions could be, after you've introduced yourself and connected the person with how you found out about them, you might ask them if they're looking for a full-time role. You're going to ask them about how much money they want to make. You're going to ask them if they prefer a job that's always changing or kind of having the same responsibilities day in and day out. So you essentially will create a set of 10 to 15 questions maybe of things that you think are going to be most pertinent to that role. And if you feel like they've passed that interview, that 10 or 15 minutes, it's essentially your effort of scrubbing them. You then are going to want to set up a time where you can meet in person for coffee or have them into your office for an informal 1-hour interview.
Okay. Now, what takes place in that informal interview?
So if they have passed the phone conversation, you're going to want to send them a link to the DISC test. So for you that aren't familiar with that, it's a personality test that essentially categorizes people into 4 main categories, which are representative of DISC. And typically what we found is the transaction coordinators are best served in a high SC role. And so before we're going to meet for that informal face-to-face interview, they will have needed to have taken the DISC test and sent you their results. So part of that face-to-face interview, independent of what their results are, you still should meet with them for 45 minutes to an hour, and you'll go over their DISC results. Now, if they're a high SC, that's essentially showing you just based on that DISC assessment that they will be better fit for working in an office in an administrative type of role.
And for those that don't know, or if you're out there listening and wondering how you can implement this, so that you can actually get a free disc profile on Tony Robbins' website. So it's really, really easy to find online, and you can send that link out to anyone that you're looking at potentially interviewing and have them do that, download the results and send them back to you, which I've done many times in other roles. It works out great. It's a great process. It gets you the results reasonably quickly. They can get it done and get the results back to you within a couple of hours. And then you have that in your hands, and we'll actually give you a printout and a PDF of exactly what the SC is, which is usually means like stabilizing cautious. So, and it gives you some guidelines for what kind of work environment they're looking for, you know, what personality type in general. Like, talk to me a little bit about, from your perspective, why that personality type works so well with the high D, high I, and why high Ds and high I should not be trusted with doing that work.
Exactly. Yep, man, that's exactly what we do. We refer them to that role. Another thing that I wanted to bring up was that at the end of that one-on-one that you're having in person, again, you're going to have a list of questions, 10 to 15 questions that you're going to ask them in person. I want to know that we can connect at a cultural level, that I feel like there's a good fit as far as them flowing well with our team, and everyone knows each team has their own culture. So you want to make sure they're going to be a good fit, that they're going to be happy in your office. And you can't know that, but typically you'll have I think I always call it the gut feeling, my entrepreneurial feeling, which Recruit Select actually cautions on. But I always feel like I'll know if they're going to be a good fit or not. But what I do is I go through the next 10 questions, maybe give them a few harder questions, maybe find out a little bit more about their past experiences. And if you feel like they've done a good job in that face-to-face, and again, think we're not maybe even at the office, this could have just been a coffee or something like that, we're going to then invite them to one of our Monday team meetings. And at a Monday team meeting, our whole team comes together. We have about 35 people that come together. And we always, anytime someone's visiting the team, we'll take the last 10 minutes for everybody to volunteer to talk about what they like about Omaha's Elite Real Estate Group. And it's really good, I feel like, for the transaction coordinator to see all the people that they would potentially be working for and working with in that setting. And if it's not a good fit, they might also deselect from the process because they just overall, they didn't like the office, they didn't like the feel, they didn't like the group, which is great. Any person that chooses to back out of the recruiting process, we're excited because it was better then than 4 months down the road after we've paid, spent $7,000 to train them.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that last part of the process, because I've sat in on exactly one of your team meetings to get a feel for your team, and it just so happened to be when a potential transaction coordinator was also sitting on that same meeting, who you eventually hired.
Interesting.
And that's exactly the effect that it had. She came away, because I got a chance to talk to her a little bit one-on-one after the team meeting.
Okay.
And she came away very, very impressed and felt like she would fit in very well. And that made a big impact in how much she wanted to get that position when it was offered.
I didn't even know that you did that. That's great, Matt. Good feedback. Nice feedback, bit, right? Man. I'm glad you noticed that. So then on that Monday meeting, we've now taken them through this process where we talked on the phone for 15 minutes, asked them 10 questions. They passed that. They've taken the disc test. We meet them in person at the office or for Starbucks for 45 minutes. We talk about their disc. We ask them another set of 10 to 15 questions. They pass that. We invite them to our Monday meeting. For the last 10 minutes, our team's telling them how great our team is. Maybe our team's asking them some more questions about themselves. We're now going to meet with them for about 15 or 20 minutes after the team meeting's over to ask them what they thought about the team, to get their overall feeling. And now we're going to be able to tell if they want the job. They're going to start saying things like, I would love to work on this team. It's a good fit. At this point, we're going to ask for 5 references. And these 5 references can be from past jobs. It can be from people they go to church with, they play bunco with, whatever it might be. But we need 5 references. And then we're going to let them know that after we've gotten in contact with their references, we're going to reach back out to them. And at that point, we're also going to challenge them to read a book. And there's several different books we've recommended in the past. Right now, we're recommending The One Thing by Gary Keller. What we really like about The One Thing is it sets essentially a tone of work ethic. And so they can kind of learn a little bit more about time blocking, focusing on, the one thing in several different areas of their lives. But I feel like it really defines what our team is all about. So now we're going to take the time to look up the references, and we're going to do what's taught in Recruit Select of going 3 deep. So every reference we talk to, we're going to ask if they know anybody else that knows the candidate. And then once we talk to that person, we're going to ask if they know anybody else that knows the candidate. And we're going to try to go 3 deep with each of the references that they give us. So potentially we could end up talking to around 15 people about this particular candidate prior to revisiting with that candidate again to offer them a job, which would be the last interview that you're going to have once you've gone through all of the references.
Mm-hmm. All right, and that between that and the book recommendation, that kind of leads into the next piece, which is the last step in all this process, and which is bringing them onto the team, onboarding them, and kind of setting them up for success.
Right.
So how do you guys do that with your team?
Okay, so assuming that now the references check out, also the book that we recommend they read, they had to have read it prior to us giving them the job offer, and so that's going to now probably be another week or two process. So all of this might seem overwhelming. This is probably a 6 to 8 hour process, but what's taught, a lot in the courses that we've taken in the past is the cost that you may incur by not selecting the right person. And so it pays to put some time and energy and money. And I know that's a crazy concept sometimes for real estate agents, but to put some money towards this recruiting effort to make sure you get the right fit. So this person's now been hired and you're all excited and you're in the honeymoon stage and it's their first week and they come in and they're looking at you like, now what, right? So if you're a single individual agent, you obviously are going to need to set time aside to give this person your undivided attention, not your 50-50 attention, which I know a lot of us are, have a tendency to give to somebody. You need to put your phone in airplane mode, which is mine is in right now, so that you can just give them a straight 1 hour or 2 hours or whatever it may be. We like to start the process off with helping our admin feel comfortable with all of the paperwork. There's lots of different pieces of paper that they may have never seen before, or probably haven't seen before in regards to all of our addendums. And so everything we use is on Dotloop and Google Drive. And so that's going to be one of their first assignments, is reading through all of the paperwork 2 or 3 times and highlighting anything that they have questions on. And so what we really like to do is we have about a 3-week onboarding process, which today I don't have to do because I have admin that onboard admin. But in the beginning, if you're an individual agent, I would recommend you set aside a couple hours a day to essentially go through the thing. So you want to probably assign the workload up front and say, hey, go through all these addendums for the next 3 or 4 hours, and then we'll meet this afternoon to kind of dissect some of those addendums that we've given to you. But your goal is going to be to get them working as soon as possible, because you want them to start producing for you as soon as possible. And I think the best way to learn is to just do. Typically, Matt, most offices are going to have a transaction coordinator as well. Most broker offices are going to have somebody that oversees the paperwork that the agent's turning in or that the agent's transaction coordinator's turning in. Typically, that person would be more than happy to spend a half an hour or an hour with your transaction coordinator. And so that's one of the things we've done, is we've utilized the transaction coordinator within our brokerage to spend an hour a day or 30 minutes a day going through and helping our newly hired transaction coordinator come up to speed with what the expectations are of our office. And I think that that's helped a lot as well.
Okay. So 2 questions as far as when to turn things over and how long it takes to get them up to speed. So number 1 would be, as a solo agent, if you're spending a couple hours a day with your transaction coordinator, how quickly do you think you can feel comfortable turning over a contract to them once it's executed and relying on them to take over that client to close?
Right. I'd turn it over. I'd probably be willing to turn it over on the first day. The number 1 thing is that you manage the process. So the first day you explain to them, here are the contracts. This, you could go through and highlight everything that's pertinent to the contract and what they need to be sure is put on the lip sheet or input sheet or whatever you guys call it. But the best way for them to learn is just to do it. And if they make mistakes, they can redo it 10 times. It's a great way to learn. So I always assume the first couple of months, always assume that you're 100% responsible. You are, even after the first couple of months, you're always 100% responsible, but always look over their work, make sure that they're putting it in the way that they need to put it in. One of the nice things is if you work at a brokerage, the mistakes that occur within your paperwork are going to be caught by the brokerage's transaction team. And so they can alert you anytime that there's a mistake, and it lets your transaction coordinator know that they missed a piece of paper or they missed a signature or whatever it may be. So worst case scenario is your brokerage catches a couple mistakes.
Okay.
So that
may have negated my second question, which was how long do you think it realistically takes to get a transaction coordinator up to speed, fully trained? What are you seeing with yours that you're bringing?
On our team, it's going to be 2 or 3 months before they really feel like they have 98% capability or capacity within that role. I kind of look at it as how long until they could train someone else to take their position. I'd say within 2 or 3 months. And it really just depends on how many expectations there are within your brokerage and within your team as to what needs to be turned in. Also, what's the responsibility of the agent versus what's the responsibility of the transaction team. I've seen teams that they only use a transaction coordinator for scanning in paperwork. That's all they do is all day they just scan all the people's paperwork. And then I've seen other teams like mine where you turn everything over to the transaction coordinator the day that the house goes under contracts, and the agent never touches it again. So of course, the less work that the transaction coordinator has to do, the less training you're going to have to give them. But I do think one of the main reasons agents don't hire someone is, one, they think they can't afford it, and two, they don't know how to train it, and they don't know how to hold them accountable. I think number one, to address that, even if the person's part-time, have a set amount of hours that they need to work every day. So if they're working 20 hours a week, have them come in from noon to 5 every day, and try to pick the times where you typically think you're going to be at the office. It makes things a lot easier to have them physically there and not working from home. I know a lot of people say, well, it's a virtual world and you can be connected via the phone. It's a lot easier for me just to know that my admin's across the hall and I can walk over and ask her to sign something, or ask him to scan email something, or whatever that task may be. It also, I think, helps your admin stay more focused if they're physically in your space working day to day. And then they're in your space working with other agents eventually, because this is a big picture hire. And after your first admin, hopefully and I know these will be in future Hangouts, but hopefully your next step would then be hiring 5 buyer's agents over the course of the next couple of months and years.
All right, now let's briefly, you don't have to touch on this too deeply, but take me back again to when you first hired your transaction coordinator. What did you do with the time that they were saving you that then enabled you to start building out your team from there?
Yeah, so Matt, I've always been huge on prospecting. I used Mojo Dialer a long time ago. I would call expired leads through RedX. I'd do lots of mailers, farmers. I'd call my Sphere. I'd do just listed, just sold calls. I'd also call a lot of past clients and get past client referrals. And so all of my time was spent, after I hired a transaction coordinator, all of my time was spent prospecting and going on appointments. Gotcha. All that paperwork piece was such a drain, having to get the paperwork filled in, or more often than just the paperwork on the front side, it was the paperwork needed on the back side to continue the negotiation along, like getting the inspection addendum signed, or getting in whatever miscellaneous addendum would pop up throughout the transaction that maybe I had missed originally. It felt like it was continually slowing me down. And so that was my main reason. And everyone listening to this is going to be agreeing with me if you don't already have a transaction coordinator. The only texts I want to get are from people saying, I'm ready to list, or I have an offer for your listing. And that would be my focus if I were to go back into that selling role, which for the audience listening, I quit selling in 2013. And I've now just been strictly working with it within an ownership, operational standpoint on our team, like as a CEO.
All right. So to sum things up, how would you encourage a solo agent? They're doing a fair number of deals, let's say, 25 to 50 deals a year. They want to take that next step. They want to put more time into prospecting, encourage them. Just where would you start, and how do you get the ball rolling and just keep moving on it today?
Well, first off, I don't think one Hangout that they watch is going to encourage them enough probably to go out and just hire a transaction coordinator tomorrow, or even start that process. So what I would challenge you to do is start recognizing how often you're touching paperwork, from the signing of the listing agreement to executing a contract to catching an extra miscellaneous initial to taking a document and getting it notarized, going on a closing. And there's all these extra activities that I think agents probably don't acknowledge that they're spending a lot of their time doing. They feel busy, like they're working, they're getting activity done, but they're not recognizing that it's not the best way for them to spend their time. And they're making excuses that they have to be spending their time that way when they could be outsourcing that to their transaction coordinator. So first, I guess, is acknowledging that you need to have a transaction coordinator. Next is going to be keeping it as simple as possible. Think about where the best places would be for you to find your transaction coordinator. It's typically going to be by connecting with people you already know. It might even be someone you already know, and you maybe have been wondering if you should hire them or offer them a job for the last couple of months, and you just haven't done it yet. I can tell you, and I don't need to persuade you, but it is going to be the biggest game changer you had in your business if you take the time that they then relieve you of and use it towards lead generation and meeting with clients. If you take the time to go golfing, it's going to be the best solution to you relieving stress, but you're going to lose out on, obviously, the dollar amount you're spending on that position, which maybe for you, if you're already making enough money, maybe the goal of a transaction coordinator is not to sell more homes. Maybe it really is just to alleviate some stress.
Yeah. Yep. And that's, you can definitely take it either way, but that is the key. If you want your business to grow and pay for the cost of the transaction coordinator, you have to spend the time like you did. And of course, you employed, I think you just listed everything under the sun possible to generate leads, which is what you spent your time doing. So yeah. Yeah.
And that is where I put my focus. And, I started to find that I had too many buyer leads, and I hired my first buyer's agent. And I know save this for another day, but the team's gotten huge. We're up to 25 full-time agents, 5 part-time, 6 admin staff, 2 people are international. And, this year we are on track to do 700. We're 2 quarters in from the time that we're recording this, and we're at 350 units and 65 million. Next year, our goal is 1,000 units and 125 million. So we've been having a lot of fun, Matt, and this whole process never would have happened without the first domino falling of hiring a transaction coordinator. It all starts with your transaction coordinator.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we want to start here. So like in future interviews, we'll go into some of those other things about how to hire a buyer's agent, how to set up your lead gen systems, some of the other practical steps that you use to get here. But this is really the first domino, which is why we wanted to start here. So with that said, I think we'll wrap this one up. We want to keep these nice and short and very packed with content. So Jeff, how do people learn more about Elite Real Estate Systems and just the work that you're doing, how to potentially join your team remotely and that sort of thing?
Yeah, thanks, Matt, for asking. So all you have to do is go out to our website, eliterealestatesystems.com. On our site, we talk a lot about our expansion teams. We actually offer, if other agents in other markets are interested in starting an Omaha's Elite Real Estate Group team in their market, they don't necessarily have to use our name. They can still stay exactly what they are, but we'll provide all the internet leads. We'll provide weekly coaching and training, and we'll even provide the transaction coordinator for you from executed contract to close. So if you want to learn more about it, go check out our website, eliterealestatesystems.com. We also offer a 12-hour workshop to anyone interested in learning a little bit more about the bigger picture of how we got to where we are today, and they can actually come and visit Omaha. So check out the site, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me anytime, or you'll see on the top right corner of the site, you can send me a Facebook message or invite to be your friend. Also Google Plus me and follow us on our YouTube page.
Awesome. Well, again, thanks so much, Jeff, for joining us. I appreciate you kind of answering all those questions and giving out all that content. So we look forward to doing this again here in a few weeks.
All right. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate it.